I'm Peter Gloor. I'm a research scientist at the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence, and my big passion is coins, collaborative innovation networks, and that's something that I have been fascinated with for a very long time. I was in industry for 10 years as a manager for two big consulting firms, and what I found is that much more than technology, what really matters is people and new ideas. And what I found is that if I was working together with like-minded people in those coins, collaborative innovation networks, that was the time I was energized most, and it was the best thing to really create new ideas, new work, just solve any big problems of the world. So that's really the big thing, those coins that I have been studying for now the last 6 years or so. So what would I like people to know and think and feel? And I think it's about working together, about getting an understanding, about being all members of a swarm. I mean, these coins, these collaborative innovation networks, for me, they are the main building blocks of those self-organizing groups of people that I call the swarms. I have stumbled on this idea of the swarm by chance when I was in Paris with my children, and we were looking for restaurants, and on the first day we ended up on top of Montmartre, which is the place where all the tourists go. So what we really did at that time, we did not follow the swarm, we followed the crowd. The food was okay, and there were tons of tourists. Next day we went to the concierge in the hotel, and we asked his advice, and we got good food at very high price. So that was asking the expert. The last day we followed the swarm, which means we followed the locals, and we got by far the best food at very decent price. So this concept of the swarm and swarm creativity, that's something that I think everybody should be aware of, and being part of the swarm, that makes us feeling good, and it's just this unbelievably energizing group or part or feeling or thing where we can change the world. And there are so many applications of this swarm creativity, and that starts by just, instead of running a project as a conventional project, if you run it as a self-organizing swarm, you will get much better results. And I have a very simple rule in that regard, and it means do not pay people in the beginning. Just advertise what you want to do, and then hopefully you will find some people. They might join you, and some might leave you, but overall you get better results, you get the people that care, you have much more fun doing it, and you get unbelievable results. And I have seen that, for example, building our own software, it was a slow process. I went through many graduate students, but what we got in the end, that was, it's a great product that actually analyzes swarms. I will go on a little bit about this, the aspect of what creative swarms can do, and how we are putting it to productive use. And one thing that the swarms do is they express themselves in blogs and online forums and so on. And if we look at what they say, we assume that they put their money where their mouth is, or to phrase it differently, they will do tomorrow what they say today, or to phrase it even more differently, we can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow by reading the collective mind of today. And that's a project we are doing right now. We call that collective prediction. And I mean, one thing which we did, and it's of course now easy to say that today, is predicting the success of Barack Obama. The point is, we compared what people were saying on blogs like Huffington Post and so on more than 18 months ago, and sadly Hillary Clinton had always very low buzz, and he was able to raise incredible excitement there, and that predicted very well what happened. But you can also apply the same thing for much more straightforward things, like what movie will be successful at the box office, because people vote with their feet. So they say, I'm going to see that movie, and if we look at online forums, like for example the Internet Movie Database, where we have the people that are passionate moviegoers talking about what they would like to see, that will predict where they go tomorrow. And so it's a very fancy way of reading the mind of the swarm and predicting what people are doing tomorrow. And the same thing we can also do if we look at email communication inside companies. The same thing we can do if we look at interaction networks through social badges, which are those things that people wear around their necks. And we can then put that to use, for example, by finding the most creative individuals. We can help groups of people or individuals to be more creative based on their interaction patterns, and the goal is always to empower the individual to form a self-organizing swarm by exposing those patterns of interaction, the positive patterns of interactions, and this allows us to predict which are the most creative teams and how we can make teams more creative. We have done projects, for example, between Japanese and American researchers, and we measured how they communicate with each other, and what we found is that in the beginning, and we represented every researcher as a big circle, and the size of the circle was how active somebody was, and the color of the circle was how much other people paid attention to what the person was saying. And in the beginning we had 3 or 4 very big white circles and some small green circles. Now you might wonder which ones were the Japanese, which ones were the Americans. I think you might guess how it was. And the point is, we showed those circles to the researchers every evening, and what we got in the end is a very well-balanced group of somewhat introvert Japanese that were saying much more, of extrovert Americans that were saying too much in the beginning, but in the end all of them, and very quickly, became very engaged, active collaborators. So this is a great system of increasing group creativity and making everybody a much better creative person. Okay, so the innovation framework that I think is the most interesting is, not surprisingly, the COIN, Collaborative Innovation Networks framework that we have been developing, which consists of the COIN in the core, which has a larger concentric circle around it of people which are in the learning network, collaborative learning network, and then an even bigger network around, which is the collaborative interest network. And it works extremely well, for example, if we look at open source programmers, where if we take the example of the creation of either Linux or the World Wide Web, we have the initial group of people. That could be Linus Torvalds for Linux or Tim Berners-Lee for the World Wide Web. He gets these 5 to 10 people to collaborate. He doesn't pay them. They are very intrinsically motivated, and they create a great system that in due course changes the world. And they attract other people that learn about those ideas. That's the collaborative learning network. And then even more people get attracted, and that's when usually the financial element comes in for the collaborative interest network. And so this is, in my view, a never-ending engine of innovation. And if we look at open source, that's a great example, and open innovation is another framework that fits in very well. So to address the question of how would I like to link it, I think looking at how to combine the COIN framework with open innovation, with open source innovation as a bigger idea, that's certainly one thing that is for me very crucial. Now, On a more personal side, what of course also interests me very much is how can we take our ideas and also get some immediate economic impact, or to phrase it differently, we have taken our ideas, we have created a startup which we call Galaxy-Advisors, which means we help people not to be stars, but be galaxies. Don't be a star, be a galaxy. Connecting other people, which means take our software and find the networks. That's very similar to what Valdis Krebs is doing with his Orgnet and inflow system, and we are trying to do similar things by finding those galactic networks, the galaxy people on the web, for example, or with email, and then trying to help them to be more creative. So on the one hand, we do that as researchers. On the other hand, we have our software, and this has now been already used by quite a few companies trying to do the same thing. Now, I have to say, it's really the companies that wouldn't need it that are the most open to those ideas, because they might already be organized as little galaxies, or they have some level of open source innovation or open innovation, but still what we found is that by just giving people a virtual mirror that mirrors back how people communicate, that's a great way of creating even more innovation and making people more open. Very similar to the example I was describing before, on the microscopic level, where you have those social badges and you have the people that in the beginning only talk, nobody listens to them, and the other ones that don't dare speaking out, and by exposing that, mirroring that back, we get in the end a much more innovative organization. So I think that those theories of COINS, collaborative innovation networks, have great applicability to address those big questions that concern mankind right now, like global warming, climate change, getting a more sustainable environment, because what we need is those intrinsically motivated people that want to do things not to be paid, but to solve the problem. And so I have been involved as an advisor and as an active member of communities. We have an initiative right here at the Center for Collective Intelligence on climate change, where we are trying to form those communities. We have been very fortunate to find some people, some local support here in the Boston communities. Some founders of big companies have been supporting us, and now it has spread out. We are trying to connect communities around the world, and obviously having a good brand like MIT behind helps somewhat. So I mean, having the best people, it's still you need a platform to carry out the message, and this is a great place for doing it. So my research areas are sort of have been evolved over the last 30 years. I was trained as a mathematician, then my PhD was in computer science, then I became a management scientist, and these days I'm shifting more and more towards sociology and psychology. So I'm probably just this weird guy who is connecting many different fields, or as we call that in social network analysis, which is perhaps the best description today of my research field, breaching structural holes, or being a gatekeeper between many different fields. So that's sort of my main area, and I'm very happy that I already get through this interview today some better connection to Valdis Krebs, who is a guy I always love interacting with. There are of course many others. We had a brief discussion before about Jared Diamond, who is a guy I admire. I don't know whether there will be ever a chance of meeting him. There are some other psychologists that, for example, study energy and how people exchange energy and what energizes us in becoming more creative. There is great creativity research. There is a fellow, I have a hard time pronouncing his name, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I don't know whether you have stumbled on it, that is has been sort of an inspiration to me. So what I try to do is very much step on the shoulders of giants, and if there is a chance of talking to someone, living giants, even better. I mean, to be an innovator or having, and I try to be coming up with new ideas. The best way is to talk to people that are smarter than myself, learn from them, and mix together their ideas and try to steal the best for myself. So interacting with other smart people, and that can be physicists, because they have studied lots of networks. That can be psychologists, as Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi that I just mentioned, and combining their ideas. I think that's what drives me anyway. Thank you. Network building is in fact one of my favorite activities, and I'm just coming back from the Sunbelt conference, which is the annual gathering of the researchers on social network analysis. And they have a great institution which they call the hospitality suite in the evening, which basically means you can drink as much as you want and you just talk with each other, and it's great for building networks. But and that's a very informal process, and diversity and randomness, serendipity, those are all essential ingredients for network building, but one can still try to put it on a somewhat more systematic footing, and I call that process cool farming. Create or farm cool trends, and we have our own coin, which we call Coin Squared, or Coin on Coins, collaborative innovation network on other coins. And it's basically a group of researchers in Helsinki, in Germany, in Italy, and at about 5 places in the US. And we have some people in Savannah, we have people at Wayne State, we have people in Berkeley, and we have people in the Boston area, we have people at Dartmouth, and we get together virtually, we meet at places like the hospitality suite at Sunbelt, we go and have dinner together, but we also work very hard and produce papers together. We even sometimes do an occasional startup together to commercialize some of those ideas, because my experience is that every successful startup, in the beginning it's a coin, which means you have an idea, you do care more about the idea than about making money, and then you get the next Google. That's, if you take your, that's my heretical view, your spelled out business plan where you have to follow my quarterly report after quarterly report, it doesn't work. But putting together smart brains and a great vision, that's a much better recipe, and that's what we do with network building. So what are the next networking enterprise opportunities that I see in my context? I think Web 2.0, social networking software, that's in my area of expertise a really hot area. I lived through e-business bubble 1.0. At that time I was the e-business practice leader of Deloitte Consulting in Europe, and it was the one time where we had more work than we could ever deliver, and I don't think that time will ever return. The golden years, but right now for social networking software, and trying to help people connect, trying to help people come up with new ideas, and trying to tell what happens tomorrow. Even in those very difficult times right now, we are very active in doing it. We have just started our startup galaxyadvisors, and together with 7 students, out of which 5 are now full-time in the startup, we are marketing our social networking software. We give it away for free to academic institutions, just because we think we should share what we have gotten with others too. And also this is a great way of getting wonderful people, highly talented people, intrinsically motivated people, applying all the principles I was talking about, and getting the ones that care about the ideas, and not the ones that want to get high salary from day one. works extremely well for us. I have also been involved into a course teaching for the last 4 years at Helsinki, Germany, Savannah, Southern Italy, and MIT, and it's about creating student coins, using our software, analyzing real organizations, communication network, and online community communication networks. And this has already turned out into an incubator. There are 2 or 3 companies that those virtual student teams, which had Finns and Italians and Germans and Americans all collaborating, and they hadn't met face to face. I have taken some of them now to San Diego to the Sunbelt conference, where they met for the first time face to face. Great experience. And some of them have now started their own business ventures in that field, and we have started ours. So again, it's trying to apply the same ideas of those coins and growing them to a bigger ecosystem, and doing cool farming of these cool ideas works extremely well. Okay, so perhaps combining the question of sustainability and participative leadership or collaborative leadership, I have been involved into trying to get the internet and computers to the developing world. We have a project and a foundation that collects used computers here and brings them to Africa. I was in Kenya, I was in Ghana, and was trying to get computers to classrooms. And it's different from the Nicolas Negroponte one laptop per child thing. Ours is much more modest. We get just the used computers that people don't want anymore. We check that they work, and then we get them to the classroom. And this is an absolutely collaborative experience on our side. What we found is that it's not so easy in the third world. It seems there sometimes you still need to be a hierarchical leader, otherwise things don't work. But overall, I think on our side, it only works if you get a group of people that all care about the idea. And obviously there is no money to pay people anyway, because you want to put everything into, invest all the resources you have into collecting the computers and getting them over there. And again, for me, it was another great learning experience on the coin model. And in fact, even in Ghana, getting the community engaged, getting the school children, I was really impressed. We had the teachers, and they didn't know what to do with the computers. Then we had the 12 to 16-year-olds, and they had been probably in an internet cafe once or twice. And so they just came and they unpacked the computers, and after 2 hours we had everything connected. They were already sitting behind the computers and using them. It was very impressive. Self-organization and these little coins, they learning from each other. One guy figured out how to connect the cables, and then the others took it up, and it just worked. Great experience. So the main inspiration for this entire swarm creativity framework, principle, and the way how those coins, collaborative innovation networks, operate are the bees. And I was exposed to bees very early on because my father was and still is a very active beekeeper. So I grew up with bees, and he admired them for his entire life, and so he sort of instilled that into me also. And the more I studied how those coins and human beings interoperate, the more I found that we really can be inspired by the bees. And you know, a bee queen never orders any bee to do something. The bee just knows it because they share the same DNA. And for me, the way how coins work together is precisely the same. You have a shared set of values, and you have initially some bee queen. You might have a group of queens, and that's probably different because, as you know, in the beehive, the queens kill each other. They only let one queen be the queen at one time. Otherwise, the hive splits, or you have to fight. And there are some parallels to that also in open source. You have there are some very highly publicized fights where, for example, in this Apache open source group, you got some leadership changes that were fairly quickly. So again, the parallel to the bees applies, but overall, coins and bees are unbelievably well in adapting to external change, being very flexible, and just do unbelievable things in creating new hives, honeycombs, collecting honey, and finding new locations. Actually, the finding new location process, for me, that's a great metaphor for how we do get new ideas, because we have the bee queen taking off with half of the swarm towards new direction, and that's the same if we have new ideas. And then what we have is we have the scouts, the bee scouts that look for greener pastures, that go out, and we have the same thing for the coins. We have this first group of the scouts, and they are the initial coin, and then they come back to the swarm, they report on those new ideas, and then you have the bee swarm. As you know, the bee queen takes this swarm, they fly to an intermediate place where they form this cluster, and then the scouts come back and they do the waggle dance, where they tell about the new location. And in the coin you have the same. You have people doing the waggle dance. That's the only way how I try to recruit people, by doing the waggle dance. So I tell, like right now, I just tell about new ideas, and that builds up the heat in the swarm. And at some point in the cluster of the bees, the scouts change from waggle dancing to just building up the heat, which means in the bee cluster that happens by piping at each other, and so the sound goes up, the heat goes up in the cluster, and same for coins. The heat goes up, and suddenly the cluster explodes, and that's when the idea gets over the tipping point. The cluster explodes, the bees go out, and they change the world with the new idea, and that's same for coins.